Hey, everybody. Dr. Ben Edwards here. Welcome to another episode of You're the Cure. We have got an outstanding show lined up today. I'm super excited about our guest, Jamie Winship. Real quick before we bring him on, I just want to kind of prep this show a little bit. And I've kind of been doing it over the past couple of weeks. 2 weeks ago, I had my dad on the show. Last week, had my wife for the first time ever in 10 years. I've been trying to get her on the show. And as she's been walking more in her true identity, came on last week, had a great show. So we're going to talk more about this. What Jamie Edwards and I were talking about last week, we're going to dive deeper into this. We have a lot of new listeners, so I kind of want to backtrack a little bit. 12 years ago, just to review, and I've not talked to Jamie Winship until right now. We have not prepped for this show, so part of this is for his benefit too. But so 12 years ago, a divine appointment where I met a doctor who told me there's no such thing as diseases. They're all consequences. They're consequences of inflammation. Kind of blew my mind. I didn't believe him. I argued with him for about a year. Finally, he said, I'm done arguing with you. Just send me your 10 sickest patients, which I did. And they all came back well. And what he taught me was deception led to a lack of knowledge, which led to a lack of stewardship of the physical body. And so in the beginning, this understanding of we could steward the body with real food, cut the processed food, eat God food, not man food. I learned about hydration. I learned about movement, just stewardship of the physical body, and a lot of things could happen, including diseases going into remission. So we saw that in the first 12 years of Veritas, that we saw a lot of that. However, I noticed over the years, there would be some non-responders, or there would be those who did respond initially, but not fully, or they fully responded, but after a while, a year or two down the road, they'd be back. And so as I was diving deeper into this, what became clear, and it's clear across the integrative, holistic, and even the conventional medical realms, is stress. Stress will absolutely keep you sick. And specifically in the physical realm, it drives cortisol. We've talked about this, my last 6 newsletters. If you haven't seen those, you can go on our websites, on our blog. So for 6 months now, I've been connecting the dots for you on what cortisol does, and it shreds everything. Cortisol, which is your fight or flight hormone, shreds your metabolism. Despite your eating and exercise, your metabolism will be in the tank if you are in high cortisol fight or flight mode. It shreds your neurons, brain fog, memory loss. You can eat all the best, supplement the best, but if you got high cortisol fight or flight, you shred your neurons, you shred your thyroid, you shred your immune system. It's incompatible with health to have a high cortisol fight or flight mode all the time. And as we dive deeper into this, we see that it's not our circumstances that are driving it. It's our, what I've been calling filters. It's how you're looking at these circumstances. And so we've been trying to connect this deeper and deeper down into this connection of the natural and the supernatural. And that's where human beings come in. God made us that divine connection point. The natural and supernatural come together. We cannot get away from the way that our thinking impacts our physical cells. Harvard has published on this. I've talked about it. You can read You Are the Placebo, Joe Dispenza. You can read Switch on Your Brain, Caroline Leaf. You can read Biology of Belief with Bruce Lipton. I've had most of those folks on the show before. And they will connect the intellectual, scientific reasons of how a thought can impact your DNA. So we've gone through that down to the point where it is clear it's not our circumstances, it's our thinking. So where are these thoughts coming from? What are they influenced by? Through this journey, one word kept popping up: separation. We have been separated. In medical school, they separated the human body. We learned compartmentalized medicine. If you have a headache, you see the neurologist. If you have a stomach ache, you see the gastroenterologist. If you have joint aches, you go to the rheumatologist or orthopedic. We get taught how to separate the body into these different systems. We separate our food. We've had Sue Becker on the show teaching us wheat is not bad. Don't call anything God made bad. And in the biblical stories on wheat with the spiritual connotations, it's when we sifted that wheat. We took out those 70 nutrients God put in that wheat so we could have shelf life for the profit margin. We've talked about sifting the salt. God's salt, 72 minerals. Salt your way to health. The Salt Fix. Those are 2 books we've talked about. Don't separate God's salt down to sodium, chloride, and iodine. 3 minerals versus 72. We separate everything. We've separated the gospel. The gospel of salvation. Jesus is my ticket to heaven. We have separated everything. And so the connection here at the mitochondria, which we've talked about, the mitochondria, your energy factory, every disease known to man, now we've boiled it down to mitochondrial dysfunction. Your carburetor can't make energy. If that's happening in your neurons, that's Alzheimer's. If that's happening in your heart muscle, that's coronary artery disease, heart attacks. If that's happening in your pancreas, that's diabetes. We've talked about all of this. Autoimmune disease, mitochondrial dysfunction. Well, what's this mitochondria doing? It's going into self-preservation mode. A mitochondria is supposed to take oxygen plus sugar and make energy. And when it can no longer do that because it cannot bring that oxygen in for various reasons we won't go into in this show, then it flips a switch into self-preservation mode, and it's called anaerobic metabolism. It can't use oxygen anymore. So it has to go into this non-oxygen consuming energy pathway that is very inefficient. And that is cancer. That is cancer metabolism. A cancer cell is separated from its original intent, mitochondrial energy production through oxygen utilization. And where we're going to go with this show today, and I'll bring in Jamie Winship on, is when we are separated from our Creator, when we don't see clearly who God is, we don't see clearly who we are, who God says we are, individually and uniquely, and we don't see our neighbor, we don't see others clearly, we get separated. Ultimately, it leads to disease. There's no way around it. So you can go to a medical clinic like ours and many others and treat symptoms pharmaceutically or nutraceutically. You can do the green version of symptom management. Or you can come into our education program and learn stewardship. That's my dad 2 weeks ago on the show. Go listen to it. He reversed his diabetes and hypertension in 90 days through nutrition and exercise only, just stewardship. Lack of knowledge. He didn't have the knowledge, but now he does, and he's implementing it. But made whole. Jamie Edwards and I last week talked about that. To truly be well, made whole, you've got to reconnect to God, to others, and to yourself, who God says you are. Fear will keep that from happening. Here's the book, Living Fearlessly, Jamie Winship. Jamie, welcome to the show. A patient handed me this book 3 weeks ago. I never heard of you before that, but God had prepped us. He had prepped us with a retired pastor here in Lubbock, Texas, was talking about true versus false identity. So I've heard this for about a year. His perspective, which is good, it really helped me connect some dots. And in fact, God told me 2 days ago, you're a dot connector. You're the kingdom dot connector. And when that patient handed me that book and I read that subtitle, I thought, wow, went straight to the book, got the book, went to YouTube, found you, been binging on you for 3 weeks. My whole team, my leadership team is binging on you. They're begging me to talk you into coming to Lubbock, Texas to train us. I'm so grateful and thankful. My wife texted, said, Ben, shut up, let Jamie do the talking.
That's great. I'm learning a lot from you talking, actually.
I'm so thankful for your time, thankful you're here, and just really want to open the floor to you. I've listened to so many of your talks. And guys, you can go to identityexchange.com. You can find the book there, and then under media, there's 4 pages of videos. Go listen to all of them. There are so many incredible stories, so much to be gained. But Jamie, I want to let you just maybe, I don't know if anything came to your mind in that. Normally I would say, hey, just introduce yourself to our audience if they've never heard of you, kind of how'd you get to where you are now? But specifically, maybe from what I introed, if anything came to mind. If not, I do have some questions we can dive into also. But first, welcome and thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me. I've never been to Lubbock, Texas, so that's definitely something worth doing. Sounds like so. Maybe we can work that out. That'd be amazing. No, I loved everything that you're saying. There was a lot of power packed information in there, and just making notes to myself about things you're saying for my own benefit. But one thing I wrote down when you're talking about the lie-based thinking, false thinking, that's really what we're battling all the time is the lie. Just at every level of, in my whole career, that's been the challenge is that mostly what people believe about God, about themselves, and about other people is actually false. I mean, if I could just reduce, well, I can give you an example of that. But and then so I just started, of course, thinking about, we don't know the truth about salt, just the way you're talking, right? The truth about wheat, like I don't know that stuff, and it's important. And the fact that we don't know the truth affects us, obviously. So one truth is, even things that you don't know still affect you, right? You can't. We just had a long discussion. We're getting ready to do a documentary on human trafficking, with an experimental. We're trying an experimental process, and the question was, can we eliminate human trafficking? Like, it's kind of like you're talking about disease. It's just like, it's as if people just accept it, like this is just the way it is and we're just going to be this way. There's nothing we can really do about it. And so 4 years ago we asked that question: if we got a group of people involved in working countering human trafficking from the law enforcement perspective mainly, and we understood the truth of who we are, and we came together from different agencies, could we get together, spend 2 days fasting and asking God about the issue of human trafficking? Couldn't we come up with a viable, workable beginning solution? Not to how to sort of pick up the debris left behind by traffickers. That's not a strategy. It's can we get ahead of it and actually stop it? So in that whole process, when we were doing that and praying, of course, ideas started coming to our mind, and that's what prayer is. All innovation is preceded by contemplation. And so if you're going to pursue innovation, you need to pursue a life of contemplation, which we don't do. So we're not really innovating on anything. We're really just trying to make things faster and make more money, like you said about wheat and salt. But the thing that I wrote down, another thing that I wrote to myself, was that in the only organizing principle of any living system is identity. There is no other organizing principle in reality for any living system other than identity. And when that identity is the way it's supposed to be, or as it ought to be, or righteous, we could say, then the system, the living system, is an open system. It's reciprocal, like you're talking about the mitochondria. It's not self-protecting. It's not self-promoting. It's reciprocal. It's adaptable. But when the identity becomes corrupted, as you're saying, in a cell, then the system it closes down, it turns inward, and it becomes parasitic. It starts to eat everything around it. And that's that happens on the cellular level, as you're talking about, but it also happens in neighborhoods, and it happens in countries. As we watch in the world, they're closed parasitic systems that just eat everything around them. And then the systems around them are forced to self-protect and self-promote. You just get endless conflict. And in all of our work, professionally, vocationally, from starting in law enforcement and then on to work overseas, the State Department and different governments, our question always was, I think it's this, because everything's unified in God's universe. Our question was, what's the source of conflict in humanity? Like, what's the cause of conflict? What is it? Because if it's a million different causes, we'll never resolve. If it's, so we were sent to work in Asia, and then into the Middle East, and then into North Africa and China and all these different locations to work in conflict zones. Our challenge was, if they're all different, if it's all, if Uyghur Muslims are distinct and unique in conflict, causes of conflict in the Balkan Peninsula and the Sahrawi and Sahara, if they're all unique, we would have to spend years in one and then years in another. Or there's a commonality to it. There's a common cause to the conflict. And we started I mean, is there a difference between a domestic dispute in a low-income neighborhood in Washington, D.C., where I'm from, or a domestic dispute in the neighborhood where all the diplomats and senators live? Is it a different cause because of a different income level or gender or ethnicity? Of course, it's not. It's people shoot themselves in low income sections and shoot themselves in high income sections for the same reason. So the question is, what's the reason? What is that cause? And as we worked around the world, we realized that, and if you know the scriptures, for those of your listeners that know the scriptures, and this is the value of them, is that James chapter 4, that's the question, do you want to know why there's wars among you? And the answer is because there's wars inside of you. That's the answer to that question. So all external conflict comes because there's already internal conflict going on, which is a really important principle. And so then, okay, so if you have people in a room that are supposedly negotiating a peace treaty, and everyone in the room is wrestling with internal conflict, you're never going to resolve external conflict. It's impossible. It can't be done. And the one thing we learn from history is that we never learn anything from history. So you can just keep watching the pattern go and go. And we've never, ever seen a peace treaty work. Never, ever. And you get détente, kind of. You might get one team's just so exhausted they can't continue, or they're just so, they're all dead. But you don't get peace. You just get someone overpowered someone else. And then that means a conflict is going to arise again. It's just a matter of time. We're watching this in the Middle East again. Only the numbers get greater. And we would do a lot of work with special forces and those kinds of things. And one of my colleagues was telling me, he's saying, in all the conflict we've been in, in Afghanistan and Iraq and all that, he said, we're still, of the number of American casualties, we're still not matching the rate of suicide. Suicide is killing more of our soldiers than any of the wars we've been in. And so, like, what is that? What is that? It's not it's not Al Qaeda. It's not ISIS. It's like the infection is deeper than that. And so when we looked at internal conflict and we looked at what's producing the internal conflict, it's fear. People are in fear. They're anxious. They're stressed, as you've said, and they're fearful. And it's everywhere. The fear is everywhere. Everywhere I go, we just did it with a company yesterday. We spent 2 days with a company. It's not a religious thing. We're just working on wholeness and resiliency in the workplace. And by day 2, we've worked through worldviews and all those kinds of things. Then day 2, it's like, okay, let's now, as a team, there's 20 of them. Let's now, as humans, let's talk about now what are we afraid of? And once you get into that topic, people start crying, the humanity comes out of them. Like, we're afraid of pretty much everything that's going on in our world right now. And so, but what's the source of your fear? So external conflict comes from internal conflict. Internal conflict is produced by fear. What's making you afraid? Like, what's the source of the fear? And the source of the fear is a wrong view of yourself, a false identity, a false view of God, and a false view of other people. It's the inversion of Jesus saying the greatest commandment you'll ever need to know is to love God, love your neighbor in the same way that you love yourself. That is above all the law and the prophets. And what we're at is a wrong view of God, a wrong view of ourselves, and almost no view of the other. They're not even, it's almost as if they're not even human, right? And so we're so upside down, and it can't do anything except produce conflict. And that's what we're just watching in the world. And even in our own government, I mean, they can't discuss anything without going on the absolute attack. Any group, any side, it's just immediate, quite vitriolic. We're coming after you. And why is that? Because we don't know who we are.
Yeah.
And what we believe about ourselves is a lie.
Yep. Exactly. And that's why we've asked you on the show, because patients come looking for the doctor to fix them, or putting a diet, supplements, protocol, natural. We tend to do natural things. We can do conventional. But we put all these up on a pedestal as my savior, and it's not gonna. It'll work temporarily at best. But until we address what Jamie's talking about right here, truly well, made whole, don't need a doctor, which is our goal. I've always said it. Let's shut down Veritas Medical because there's no need. Your body's designed to function, but it cannot do it without this piece. And so this is kind of this crowning. God's flipping our world, our identity as a business, as a clinic, Jamie, just so you know, medical, and God said, no, we're flipping. Medical can still be there, but it's clear, it needs to be clear, it's symptomatic treatment. And then wellness, that's great. Teach. Lack of knowledge, my people are destroyed. But this made whole, it's absolutely essential. If you want to do what you're saying you're doing, your word truth, veritas is truth. You can't carry that word unless you go fully into the whole thing, which it's been awesome. God's just continued to reveal and honestly bring you into our lives now. It's awesome. But I want you, if you could, connect some dots for people who maybe they're tracking with you, but like practically speaking, I mean, you have so many amazing stories, personal and your team, but in the scriptures too, Gideon and David, and there's so many. And again, guys, I encourage you to go listen to all the videos on identityexchange.com. But any, Jamie, that you tend to kind of go to sort of solidify this for people that are hearing this for the first time?
Yeah, I'll give you one that I don't tell a lot, but because of the situation and that we're in the Middle East right now, I want to share it. I've shared it a couple of times, but so everything has to do with truth. The only thing that sets a human being free, is to know and experience truth. Not just know it, but they have to know and experience truth. This sets people free. And what we're not good at, humans, and Christians are no exception to any of this, is we're not good at telling the truth. Now, I don't mean we're liars. I just mean we don't even, I think, know what it is. And so when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one accesses God apart from me. That's what he's saying. Like if Jesus, when we look at Jesus, who's the exact representation of the invisible God, Jesus is the only person we can look to see God, that right, which is to me astounding. And this is why wherever we work in the world, whatever the background of the people we work with, we have to end up at some sort of model of what a human is supposed to be like, because humans can't do what they've never seen. So we have to. So the writer of Hebrews says, this is the way the world looks, but we do see Jesus, which elevates the whole thing. Jesus is a human who understands the truth of who they are. Absolutely. And they don't get their identity from what they do, what they have, and what people think about them, which is how we gain identity. None of those are true identity. True identity is received in community from God. That's what true identity is. So it's received. Radical individualism, which is the counterfeit to true identity, is not received. It's self-generated. It's not done in community. It's very individual and subjective, and it creates almost immediate conflict. True identity is received in community. So when and you can read this all through the scriptures, when men and women are discovering who they truly are, that what God knit together in their mother's womb, they're understanding it immediately in relation to community, like a hand realizes it's a hand in relation to an arm, and a body so that right away I see my value in a community. So when you understand identity, you realize, wow, now that I know the truth of who I am, I can only live out this identity in relation to community. I can't go live off somewhere by myself and be a lone wolf and a lone survivor. That would be separating, as you said earlier, that would lead to separation, which in reality leads to death. Separation breaks down systems and leads to death. And the passage, when you think of it, the soul that sinneth, the soul that separates, it will die. That's the truth. That's a true statement. Not because you're a bad person necessarily, but because we were made to be in community and connection with God, in a right connection with ourselves, in a right connection with others. So as we're discovering true identity, it centers around what we call truth tell, mind change, form change. That's the circle that we're always in, that Jesus is always walking people through. Truth tell, we would use the word confession. If you're looking from a biblical sort of perspective, confession means to tell the truth. Not to say you're sorry, it means to truth tell. Jesus never walks around demanding that people apologize to him. He does demand that you tell the truth, because truth liberates people. And then truth telling, I tell the truth of what I really believe about myself, God, and others. I confess, tell that to God or to my community. And then God tells truth back to us. He tells us what's truly true, which causes us to turn, repent, and walk in a new way, which leads to form change. We start to live our life differently. I'm sure all the things that you're doing in your practice. Here's what's true. Right? Here's your true condition. We have to say this is our true condition. Like, not come in and say, I hate myself. Can you give me a prescription?
Right.
Right? Because there is none for that. Like that. But I'll just tell this encounter we had, and you can interrupt me, please, whenever you feel like.
Keep going.
So so I came through the police department. When I was in my 5th year, I was called in and interviewed by an operations guy from the CIA. And his question was, how are you doing what you're doing in the police department? Because of the way I was working cases and interacting with people. And I explained it to him, and it was an interesting encounter. But mostly what I was saying to him was, like, in my way back in those days, I was 28, trying to explain what I was doing. And I was just saying, like, what I'm doing with people is what I've learned to do from reading the Bible. That's what I do with people. And the effect on them is it closes cases and it resolves criminal activity. And that's what it does. So as a result of that interview, he asked me if I thought I could do that in the Muslim world overseas. And I said, unless the people are dramatically different than the people in the US, I'm sure it'll work. So that resulted in me leaving the police department. I went to grad school, and then we ended up overseas for 27 years. We worked all over the place, predominantly in the Muslim world, in conflict zones in the Muslim world. So at one point in our career, and we always work in teams, sometimes teams of 3, sometimes teams of 20. It just depends on who we're working for and what the goal is. But I was working in conjunction with the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority. I was working back and forth between the two. And this is in like 2008 or 9, I think. And so in the West Bank, we didn't have access to Gaza for lots of reasons. So, but I wanted to see what we could do with Hamas leaders, members, because they're militant, and it was, and supported by some not so nice people. But to us, it's like saying we're going to go work with the Bloods and the Crips. It's just a gang. These are gangs, and all of us are in gangs. All of us, one gang. We're in one gang or another, and gangs give a sense of belonging and protection to people, but they also destroy the members. That's what gangs do. Whether you're in a political gang or a religious gang or whatever you're in, we tend to go to gangs for identity and belonging and protection and all that. So going into Hamas, so we couldn't go into Gaza, so we went into the West Bank and we went into a Hamas controlled town. And in that town, me and the couple of people on our team, we go in and we start interacting with the leadership of that town. So I'm not Muslim, I'm not Arab. I don't blend into that community. When I came into that community, I'm clearly a white American male. There's no way to hide, and so we call it getting a person's fist down. I can't go in there and sneak around and pretend like I'm something I'm not. We come in. This is who I am. I'm a follower of Christ. This is my role. This is who I work for. Um, we are here to take away your fear. That's what I tell people. We are here to take away what it is you're afraid of. What we need to know is what exactly are you afraid of, because you don't really know what you're afraid of. You actually don't know. So we're here to help you figure out what you're really afraid of, when you learn to be afraid of it, and why you don't have to be afraid of that ever. The value of fear is warning you. Fear is a dashboard warning light going off saying something's wrong in the engine. It's so fear is just a pointer in a way, and it's an invitation. We say fear is an invitation for a conversation that leads to transformation. That's the great value of fear. So when someone says to me, I'm afraid, I'm like, great, okay, tell me, what are you afraid of? Fear is God's invitation to have a conversation to take away the thing that's the cause of the fear. The fear is doing what it's supposed to do, like pain in the body. It's telling you something's wrong. As you're saying in your intro, unless you address the truth of what's wrong, you're just going to treat symptoms of it, and you're not going to get well. Same thing in the limbic system. Like, you're afraid. What are you afraid of? All fear, other than the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises, is learned. So you learn to be afraid of a certain situation or scenario or belief. We want to know, where did you learn it? And let's go back and figure out if what you learned is in fact true, because the fear is saying it's probably false. Okay, so that's the idea. So go into the Hamas town. They're afraid of me immediately. Why are they afraid of me? Because of what I represent. I represent a threat to them. And I would say to them, why are you afraid of me? You've never even met me. We're afraid of what you represent. What do I represent? You represent the United States of America, which is a Christian country that hates Muslims. That's what you represent. And you represent a Christian country that loves Israel above every other people group, and Israel can do no wrong. And so we know that you're pro-Israel, that you're Christian, and that you think Muslims are from Satan. That's the immediate perception when I walk in their town. That perception creates immediate separation. Immediate. So my goal is, I'm a minister of reconciliation. That's what I am. I'm not in there to create separation. I'm in there as Christ has reconciled me to God. I'm there to reconcile. So we start working with the Hamas leaders, working through their fear, working through these kinds of things, which took it. It takes months of just deconstructing all the fear and all the stereotypes and all that stuff, until it's just human beings together, and then start working at a deeper level. So in the course of that, I was flying back and forth between Houston and Tel Aviv because of the project we were working. And so I was in Houston and going to a church there in Houston, and I heard they were going to have a men's retreat. And so I was there, and I was talking to the person in charge of the men's retreat, and I said, can I bring some men from the Middle East to the men's retreat? And he said, sure. Yeah, it's sure. And I said, well, they're Hamas. Can I bring Hamas leaders to the men's retreat? What do you think he said?
Maybe not, Jamie.
Yeah, that's what he said. No. Now, why would he say no? Like we are making a decision to stay separate, right? Why? Because we're afraid of everything you just said. What are people going to think? They're going to murder us all when they get here, you know? And so I'm asking followers of Jesus who are having a retreat for, I think, all men, any man, can we bring these people? And the answer is no, which means and I said to the guy, so this is not a men's retreat. This is a Christian club retreat. That's all this is. And it's probably only certain Christian club retreat. Is that right? Is that accurate? See, you tell the truth. What is this? What are we doing here? And so I said to him, what do I need to do? Because this is going to bless you guys. Do you understand that? It'll bless them, but it's going to bless you just as much because it's going to. And I said, do you understand that you're preventing peace? Do you understand that? Like you're the obstacle to reconciliation and peace. We can't be that. And so he relented. He was like, okay. He goes, wow. I mean, he said, who's ever asked me, can we bring Hamas people? Nobody. We never think, you don't even think this way. And I said, what can I do to help? And he said, why don't you be the speaker? Because you know how to talk in this scenario. And I said, okay. I said, that's a deal. I'll speak if you let these guys come. And he's like, okay, we'll do it. So then I went to the biggest mosque in Houston. And I went to the leadership and I said, hey, we're doing a men's retreat over here. I would love for you guys to come. And they're like, what? Why are you inviting us to that? And I said, because it's a men's retreat. And they're like, we're not Christians. See, just the separation that's just built into the whole system. It's not an open door, it's not perceived that way. So I said so the mosque leaders were like, no, we don't really, we're not interested in coming there. Because why not? Because you guys are going to try and convert us into Christianity, and we don't want to do that. And I said, well, I'm the speaker, and that's not what's going to happen. We are going to talk about Jesus a lot, but the conversion's not the goal. Transformation is the goal. And I said, and I'm bringing 5 Hamas leaders with me from the Middle East. And he said, the Imam says, you're kidding. He was Pakistani. You're kidding. And I said, no. And he goes, why are they letting them come? He said, we wouldn't even invite those people. Right. And so just see the camps and the separation and the sickness that just goes on in this, and nothing's ever going to change. So anyway, he agrees to come if the Hamas guys are going to come. So I go back to the Middle East. I meet with the Hamas guys and I say there were 5 leaders, and I met with them and I said, hey, there's this thing in the United States we do. It's called a men's retreat. This is what's involved. It's Christian guys. They get together. There are going to be some Muslims coming from a mosque. But I would love it if you would come. What do you think they said?
No.
No way. Right? So it's the different separated groups, and you go to invite them and they're all like, no, 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 no. But all of them for the same reason. We're afraid. We're afraid of them. You don't even know them. That's the only way the fear can continue to exist is because you don't know them. So it's all just lies you believe, back to lie-based thinking. Anyway, I finally talked the Hamas guys. Their thing was like, Israel's never going to let us leave this place. Most of them had already been in prisons. A lot of hostility in their life. And so they have to get permission from Israel to go. And I said, so if I can get the permission, will you come with me? And they were so positive I wouldn't be able to get it. They said, okay. So then I went to the American consular office and I said, hey, you guys, if I bring in 5 Hamas guys from the West Bank, will you give them visas into the U.S. for 10 days? My responsibility. I'll take responsibility. Blah blah blah. And they said, well, we'll do it if you're responsible for them. But there's no way you're going to get them through Israel to the U.S. consular office. But if you could get them here, well, they were the same way. You're never going to accomplish this. But if you do. So I started praying and asking God, how would you bring these Hamas guys with permission through Israel to the U.S. consular agent? Like, I don't know how to do it, because if I just go to the Israelis and say, can we do this? They're like going to say no. So how would I do it? And so because I believe in the God who speaks and the God who's the God of reconciliation, that he has a way to cut through all this nonsense. And so one day I was working with the Israelis, and I was with this captain, military captain, and he was telling me about, we were working on a project, and he said, I can move this. We're talking to a different group of Palestinians. He said, I can move these leaders through Israel over to here. And I said, do you have the power to do that? He said, I can do it for 24 hours. He said, I have the power to move anyone within a 24-hour period that I want to. And I said, what about these 5 guys over here? And he said, yeah, technically I could do it. I do. That's my role. And I said, can you let me bring them? Can I have them for 24 hours? Can I move them for 24 hours? You can come with me, whatever you want to do. He agrees. So the Hamas guys are like, there's no way. It ends up the Israelis come and move them to the U.S. consular office. So immediately the Hamas guys are like, wait a second, these Israelis are helping us get to here? Like, it started to shift their view of the world. And I said, yeah, because what you believe is a lie. Get to the U.S. Embassy, the guy can't believe it. He's like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? The Israelis usher them in, get the visas, take them to the U.S. When they get to the U.S., 700 men show up at the retreat, because they know these Hamas guys are coming. And so when we bring the Hamas guys in, I told the Hamas guys, they were hilarious. They'd never been in an airplane before. They'd never been outside their village before. They'd never seen water before, these guys. Their whole lives, never been allowed to go anywhere in their whole life. So it's the most astounding experience of their life. And when we were up in the plane, they were just like, one guy kept saying, this is Malakut Allah. This is the kingdom of God. He was looking down at the earth from the airplane at night. He's like, I've never had this perspective. It's always been inside this wall. I've never known this freedom. And I said, this is what the kingdom of God is like. You're not trapped. Look what you're doing. Look who helped you to get here. Israel and Americans did this. Don't forget that. And so get to the retreat. And I told him, okay, when you go into this retreat, there's like 600 dudes there. And we sleep in these bunkhouses. I had to explain the whole thing to them. They had no idea what. And I said, you're just going to get assigned to a bunkhouse, and you're not going to be together. You're going to be in a room with 15 other dudes, and they're Texans and they're Christians. And they were like, oh my gosh, are they going to kill us? So they were so scared. Everyone's afraid of everybody else. And I said, and you're just going to go in there, and we're just going to go in there and trust. And so we went. And over the course of the days, and the other Muslims came, and they sat right in the front row the whole time, the guys from the mosque came. And over the course of the week, one by one, those Hamas guys came to faith in Jesus. Because one of them, after the first night there, he stood up in the meeting, because in a mosque, if you're speaking in a mosque and someone's mad at you, they just start yelling. So that's how they would do it in the meetings at the retreat. They would just stand up and start talking. And I'd be like, okay, wait a second. Hassan has something to say. What do you want to say? And Hassan says, I had a dream last night, and in the dream I met Jesus. That's what he says in front of all these men. And I said, okay, what happened? He goes, well, remember when we were on the plane and I said, this is the kingdom of God? And I said, yeah, that was beautiful. He goes, Jesus told me that this is the kingdom of God, in the room with all these Christians. This is the kingdom of God. And he said, I'm so grateful that you all have welcomed me here to be part of the kingdom of God. And that's how that guy came to faith in Jesus. He was the leader. And one by one, the men all had dreams about Jesus during the retreat. One of them wanted to get baptized in front of all the men, and we didn't rebaptize them. He put it on YouTube. That all happened. It was beautiful. All this amazing stuff happened. It'd take a long time to say. When we get back to the village, into Hamas, the Hamas leader takes me with him, and he goes into his group of that he runs, and he says, we're not fighting anymore. Because when I was at this men's retreat, I met Jesus, and Jesus says, we're not fighting anymore. This is not the right thing to do. And he disbanded the group. And man, you should have seen that room, how hostile that room was. And so, but he did it. And then one of the guys was an administrator of a school, the school in the area, the Muslim school. They changed the name of the school to the Kingdom of God School, and they started teaching students how to pray and hear God speak to them the way they had learned at the men's retreat. The school went from being this underperforming, horrible school into, I was there the year they got the award from USAID for the top performing school in the West Bank.
Wow.
All happened because the kids started getting their identity from God as taught to them by the teachers, as taught to them by the head of the school and the superintendent and the guys that were at the retreat. I'm still amazing friends with those guys today. Lots of things have happened in their community, but I'll tell you one thing: they are not involved in this violence. They're not. So the beauty of that story is there is a way to end this. There is a way to end it, but not the way we're going to do it. So the challenge, once the Christian guys and the Muslim guys, we all got together and we started telling the truth about I'm afraid of you. That's what I'm afraid of. Then God could speak, and then the Muslim guys especially, but even the Christians started to realize the truth about God. God, like Peter says in Acts, I now see that God shows no favoritism to any group, because Peter didn't want to go be with Cornelius because he was dirty. And God's like, don't you dare call dirty what I created. And those men got to experience that together. Then next year we did the retreat. The Muslims brought 25 leaders. Plus we had Tunisians from Paris come, and they brought their wives, and we had to do a women's retreat too. So it just continued to grow. And then one of the years it was so many Muslims that wanted to come, we had to do their own retreat in Jordan because we couldn't fly everybody there. So it's some of the most remarkable stuff. And what makes me sad is watching conditions in the world today and people just squaring off and screaming and yelling at each other and, all this stuff, when really all it would take is like, what am I afraid of? And what's my identity in the kingdom? Okay. In my own identity, my identity is my gift to my neighbor, whoever my neighbor is, Jesus talked about. And then when I give that gift to my neighbor and then it spreads like that, things like Hamas, things like this can't exist in that truth. But as long as we live in the separate, false, fear-based, lie-based world, the conflict rages. But it doesn't have to.
Yeah. Incredible story, Jamie. That's amazing. It's so simple. That's the kingdom. We make things so complicated and so complex, and there's such simplicity to what you just shared.
That's right. Yeah, because complexity. Well, the universe is complex, but it's beautiful, and it's the thing that causes complex things to become complicated is fear. There's a complexity to understanding how the Muslim guys think, and there's a beautiful complexity to it. But we're just dealing with certain parts of the complexity model, just little parts of it, or each in our own part. But what makes it complicated is when we don't want to do it.
Yeah. Well, one question I had, and this may take more than the 10 minutes we have left, but in listening to a lot of your videos, and even this one, a lot of work in the Middle East, Muslims, um, and I'm thinking about here in West Texas and in the Western world in general, the intellectualism, the religion, the theological debates. I mean, just you said the God who speaks, and some people think God quit speaking in Acts, whatever. Do you see that a difference between the East, the Middle East, and the West, and United States in particular? Could you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's the difference between in the Eastern world, they're much more open to God being experiential and actually interacting with them. So like a lot for the young Muslim fighters, when we would start working with those guys, we would take them out into the desert because the desert is sacred to them, and they're urban fighters. And so you pull them out into the desert, all of a sudden they would say in the desert, there's no props. It's just you and God. And so immediately they felt very, Americans are this way too. You get them out in the wilderness somewhere, and it's like there's this kind of opening up to like, wow, this is. But they were we would do false identity with them, and then we would send them out, and they would spend the night out in the desert, looking up at the stars, asking God what He said about them, and they would come back at dawn and relate it. It's so beautiful. But we did that with college kids like 3 weeks ago in Arizona. Same thing. Had the same result. This beautiful, a lot of crying. So the intellectualism is fear. It's always fear. It's like I'm just going to get so far up in my head that I don't have to deal with all the stuff that I'm really afraid of down here. And that's why when we're talking to people, like wait, I always say to them, like, stop, wait. What I want to know right now is, what are you most afraid of in your life currently? That just always cuts through all this, blah, blah. We do these exercises, like, what's the greatest burden in your life right now? You're a human. What's going on? Just to get them to tell the truth. I don't want to know what you know. I want to know what's going on inside of your heart as a human, because I'm a human and I have it too. Right. And so to get away from that, anytime someone's trying to tell you how much they know, it's because they're afraid. The most prideful person in the room is the most afraid person in the room. And we always know that. So again, it's a matter of just asking questions that Jesus does it so well. Is just He cuts right through all the false, because He wants to talk to the true you. He wants to communicate to the true you, and we're afraid of the true us. We're afraid of it. Yesterday in that company we're working with, when they were talking about what are names that I believe about myself that hurt me, these are accomplished professionals: imposter, liar, not good enough, not worthy. These are well-educated people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, and that's what they deep down believe about themselves. It took us one whole day to get them to say that, just to cut through all of the defense mechanisms. And so when they get to that place, then the healing begins, as you're saying. When you get down to the truth that, okay, now we know what's wrong. So now God can start to bring healing and wholeness, because now you're going to tell the truth. And truth is the beginning of freedom.
Yeah. And what's so cool is in so excuse me, so many of these videos that I've seen from you, just going through scripture and seeing the example, even all the way back to Eve, the mother of all living, versus I'm ashamed, I'm naked and I'm ashamed. And who told you that? Who called you that?
The very beginning, yes.
Yeah. And going right through Gideon, Moses, all of them. Um, it's incredible. Well, Jamie, thank you. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but tell us a little more. I mean, you have a company that goes in corporately and trains employees. You do corporate training. You do individual stuff. I know on your website I saw some individual. You can sign up, do some e-courses, stuff like that. Tell us a little bit about ways people can connect to you and get educated.
Yeah, you can just come on our website, identityexchange.com. Yeah, we do. We have basic online courses. One little course called Knowing Rediscovered, which is just what it says. We've lost our way of knowing things. And so we have to rediscover what it means to know things and to understand things. It's a short kind of intro course into more advanced intensives, and you can have a coach with you. You can do an intensive with me and Donna. You can do it on your own online, however, whatever you feel comfortable doing. And our company works with. We just did a thing with Special Forces. We just are working on a thing with Major League Baseball right now. We've done work in the NFL. Pretty much. The Metropolitan DC Police just contacted us today about an initiative they're trying to run in the city, and I think all those things are. It's just where believers should be anyway, right? We're all everywhere believers. Once you understand your identity, in the location wherever you are. Your identity is your gift to your vocation, to your family, to whoever's around you. And so all we're doing, like with the company we just were in yesterday and the day before, it, they're a marketing company, and it was so funny because when we were finished with them and we were with their executives, it was like they were like, do you know, they asked me, they said, do you know what we could be doing when a company calls us in and says, help us discover our identity as a company? That's what their company does. They said, we don't even know our own identity. How are we helping other? And now that they do, they're so excited. Their tagline was something like, "What you to the company is what you do is important." And I said, "What would you say now?" They would say, "Who you are is important." Right, because what you do comes from who you are. So your company's been successful, but you're starting at step two of everything. What would happen if you go with a team from any company and help them discover who they are? It is a gift they will never forget you bring into them in the marketplace, right? So once we teach a company how to do it, they don't, like you said, we just work our way out of a job as fast as we can. You can get this. You're a human. Once you know who you are, you can walk another person into understanding who they are, and that's what starts people movements.
Yeah. Well, and just for the listeners, I'll tell you, this has been life transforming for me, for Jamie, my wife, Jamie, for employees here at my practice and patients too. I had this false identity that I have to be right, and that got set up in me early on, reinforced by a performance mindset. If I perform, make all A's, first chair in band, first team on the basketball team, people will love me, accept me. Fear of man, I got to keep everyone happy, people pleasing, and these filters or these thoughts, these lies, false identities, whatever, it causes you to do stuff, including go to a small town, be a country doctor like my granddad's for 7 years. And the devil would love for me to just stay there for 50 years and retire there and get the keys to the city. And fear of man and performance and being right would have handcuffed me to that county clinic. And walking in my true identity of just being a dot connector, the impact, and then the burden's not on me to fix anybody. I just have to be me, as you said, doing comes from being, and then the other people on the team will be who they are, and as a unit, we can impact for the kingdom. It's awesome.
You'll never know how much the impact you have. I mean, it's just astounding. Yeah, one day in glory, you'll see what happened when you just be who God made you to be. That's it. Just be who God made you to be, and give that identity away every day. It is just liberating. It takes the responsibility off you. And so that's great. It's awesome.
That's great, Jamie. Again, everybody, here's the book, Living Fearless, and the website, identityexchange.com. Go check it out. Jamie, thank you for being here. Everybody, well, you're very welcome. Hopefully, we can have you back someday for a part two. And we'll put this up on veritasmedical.com on the archive page, also on the podcast, iTunes, and all the other ones. So, y'all go check it out, share it with your family and friends, and go learn who God calls you to be. I'm Dr. Ben Edwards. You're the cure for Jamie Winship. We'll see y'all next time. Thank you for being with us today.